Good old peak piece. I know for a lot of y'all, if you've been watching the channel, this chapter might have seemed like this information has been presented in the story before, and it has. In this way, no, not as clear cut as it was presented by Shaka in this chapter, not at all, but peak piece, that's what we're calling it, peak piece. We're not going to waste any time. We're going to talk about some of the best moments from One Piece chapter 1066, because Oda's in his bag again. First, the cover story. Ain't shit happened. It's just basically Germa going back to Germa 66 headquarters. Like, when I was reading, I was like, okay, Oda, why are you showing this? But we see Caesar flying back, and again, one of the more seamless cover stories that Oda's have ever had, considering cover stories typically don't coincide as well with what's going on in the story. And with us getting a Vegapunk reveal in this chapter, fun fact, the scholars of the One Piece community has figured out Vegapunk's design being actually hinted and shown in the manga before this chapter. You wanna know what chapter that was? Chapter 684, back in the Punk Hazard arc. This is when Caesar was exiled by Vegapunk, telling him, you gotta get out of here, you're a bum, or basically say he can't cover for him anymore because Caesar was out of control. Oda back then had Vegapunk's idea and his design mapped out. It's incredible. Continuing from last week, the idea is that we're in a post-apocalyptic, that's always interesting to say, a post-apocalyptic society. There are a bunch of tidbits that people found outside the story that I'll mention at some point in this discussion or review. But we're in a world that has been reborn, right? We're trying to get back to the past, back to the future, whatever the hell. I want you guys to understand what's being laid out in this chapter are things that we've discussed ad nauseum on this channel, but it's never been laid out in such a detailed and precise manner, even though just conjecture. And I'm not sure how often people use conjecture in just regular day speech, but conjecture is basically when you come to an opinion or conclusion based on incomplete information. So that's why Shaka was saying, hey, it's just conjecture. I don't have all the information. It confirmed a few things for me. One, Shaka probably isn't from the Void Century, and Vegapunk's age was also confirmed in this chapter. Two, we're about to see something really big next chapter. It's something that might break the community, I'm not gonna lie. And three, it's probably time to sub to the channel because we're about to get deep into what's been going on in this chapter and how significant it is, because there's some tidbits in here, guys, that I gotta tell you, it might change how you view One Piece. A bit much? Okay, maybe I oversold that, but just in case I'm not overselling it, just subscribe and like. Okay, now to the chapter. I'm not gonna just recap everything that happened just because that's boring. Let's talk about our favorite things. Saul is alive, and he is alive and well on Elbaf, apparently. Now, he's somebody that we knew got wiped out by a Aokiji back then in the Ohara incident 22 years ago. Okay, not for the wrong reason saying we love when people die in One Piece. It's just, it brought so much to Robin's character. It brought so much to the Ohara arc, but I want to let you guys know something. Saul's death was not the tragedy, the main tragedy of Ohara. The main tragedy of Ohara was Ohara. All that information, all the scholars combined or compiled in this place were wiped out. Mass genocide based on trying to basically silence information. That was the entire thing. Robin lost her mother. We can't remember the anime scene when Robin was running past her mother, not even realizing it. Touched me to my core. Sounds a bit weird, but it did. Saul and her friendship was icing on the cake. This is somebody she met that she grew and developed a relationship with, and he was taken away from her in front of her eyes by the big baddie Aokiji. We got to talk about that bad man at some point because he's been doing very bad things. Or has he? There are a few things about Saul I want to talk about before we continue, just because it's important. Based on what they're saying here, Saul, he got frozen by Aokiji. If you go back, Aokiji used 2 attacks at that point versus Saul. He used Ice Time and Ice Time Capsule. So what's a time capsule? Well, it's something that's made to last or stand the test of time until a further date. So Aokiji, he used Ice Time Capsule on Saul to preserve him and not to actually freeze his heart. We know for Aokiji, you have to put these people in water and thaw them out before the ice reaches their heart. For Saul, Ice Time Capsule, it's literally just preservation. And so for him, he was to be preserved. But what happened in Ohara? They were blown up, and what was all around? Fire. So then Saul was thawed out, and then what happened? He got burned. So then what is Saul? The man scarred by fire. You goddamn right. So what's gonna happen here? More than likely, what I'm thinking is based off my conclusions and my conjecture, Law, Luffy, and Kid will end up in Elbaf, and then we're gonna find out who this man scarred by fire actually is. But here's the thing, this man scarred by fire was spitting hot fire about the people of Elbaf even before the incident of Ohara. Well, what was he saying? He was saying not to lump him in with these giants, these barbarians. Even though the giants from Elbaf were the most famous, he was implying he was not from Elbaf at all. So now, if Saul, well, more than likely Saul, is the one in Elbaf, those conversations must be going a little bit differently, don't you think, man? Scarred by fire. And again, this is conjecture considering that we don't actually know if Saul is the man scarred by fire. We are coming to a conclusion based on some incomplete information. I love conjecture. This is an amazing moment for Robin's character. Like, why the hell does that make sense? Because some people are saying it's taken away from Robin's backstory, it's taken away from the O'Hara incident, because Saul is a major death that we had and we held on to, and it hurts our heart that it's being taken away. Well, I get it, but then I don't, considering, again, the greatest tragedy was the O'Harans dying. And for Robin, it brings things full circle. Robin was super traumatized by the fact that one of her good friends were killed in front of her. Now, Saul, before he died, saying that she will definitely find her Nakama, not knowing that Saul was talking about himself. Now, there are a few things in regards to this situation. Saul, who has been alive this entire time, why did he not contact Robin? But why the hell would he contact Robin, knowing responsibility that's now resting on his shoulders, considering that he is carrying on the will of O'Hara, along with Robin? I think deep down, Saul, even while it's being alive, understands and knows that he will meet Robin again, but also Saul more than likely has been doing things in the background. If Kid, and again, this is based off the opinion that Saul is the man scarred by fire. And why am I coming to that conclusion? Well, it makes the most sense. Our top candidates were Sabo, Aokiji, Shiki, Scopper. Shiki and Scopper don't even make no sense. Aokiji, we're just saying it based off the scars. And why wouldn't they just say Sabo? So again, process of elimination. We're thinking more than likely, you better call Saul. We have not seen this type of emotion from Robin in a long time. The last time, matter of fact, can you guess the last time you saw emotion, tears from Robin? You guessed it, Ryunosuke in Zou. That was the last time we saw actual tears. No, seriously, Robin was about to ugly cry, right? And she caught herself like, I can't let him see me weak. All right, I'm from O'Hara. Sasai. Anyway, this is One Piece, where you can tug on the heartstrings of not only the characters in the story, but the characters reading the story, because you're bringing things full circle. Saul is alive. Saul is the man who is carrying on the will of O'Hara from a different perspective, and Robin has to follow that path. We'll talk about Dragon in a bit, and of course Vegapunk in a bit, because they're so important to this entire thing, and that's why this chapter is pretty okay, because I think it's a very great chapter, even considering all the things that we probably already knew or figured. It's so tightly wrapped based on the characters involved in this chapter. Calling it a masterpiece would be too much. Oda's in his bag. Let me explain. Having Vegapunk in this chapter and realizing all the theories that we've compiled over the years and somewhat materializing them and letting us know we were correct. Everything we've figured or speculated about the ancient kingdom coming together and fighting against the 20 kings, we were correct. And they did all that during the Void Century and erased everything so people could not figure it out. We were correct. Shaka, after everything that happened to O'Hara, Saul came back, gathered the books. If you guys did notice, Heisruden, Gerd, these are people that we've met before, went and took all the books to Elbaf. Now, Elbaf is going to be super significant again for these major characters because it's almost as if it's a converging point. We're going to collect information from all these different points and we're going to meet in Elbaf, this big island, this big place where it's hyped up to have the greatest army. This is going to be Usopp's arc. We speculate there are ties to Shanks. It is the arc in which things become complete. The will of D, O'Hara, and even the Void Century, because all the information is there. Now, how much is Shaka going to reveal at this point is anybody's guess, but Shaka did memorize everything and continue the research of O'Hara. So what's going to happen? More than likely, he's figured out new information that's going to be presented to us, but not all of it. Again, why the characters of this chapter played a major role. Dragon was with Robin for 2 years after he saved her from Tequila Wolf. Dragon did not say anything to Robin about O'Hara, right? The will of O'Hara, and it lives on in Elbaf. I don't know, Dragon is a very calculated individual, but this chapter brought some more characterization to him and things that he did. Well, how? Well, mainly because we now know one, well, we figured, but Dragon confirmed started the Revolutionary Army, originally known as the Freedom Fighters. Secondly, the last straw. This is what did it. Dragon felt like this was too far. Destroying people for the sake of just questioning the world government is too far. He had to draw a line, and he didn't have his tattoo back in the day. He had, something, a symbol showing that this is his resolve, but then he got it tatted on his face, and that's a scary sight. Because what this visual is telling me, the design is amazing, is that Dragon, being as outwardly with this sign, this insignia, is saying, I am a freedom fighter. I don't care who sees I'm a freedom fighter. If you have a problem with me being a freedom fighter, come and fight for your freedom. Isn't that crazy? There is no doubt in my mind that Dragon knows about the history of the world, considering he was good friends with Professor Clover, so who knows what notes they shared there. And Vegapunk. The major thing is going to be Vegapunk's design as revealed this chapter. He has a very large, enormous hat, a weird ass head. Like I mentioned, chapter 684, Oda showed his design all the way back then. This was his plan for him, more than likely inspired by Albert Einstein. People were saying Isaac Newton as well. We'll get into that when we talk about Easter eggs from this chapter. A new thing that we're rolling out that I'm excited to talk about. Either way, it reveals so much about the origins of the revolutionaries, because Dragon, he tried to recruit Vegapunk. Vegapunk turned him down because Dragon had no resources. He called him a ragtag operation, meaning Dragon was starting from the bottom. He's like, it's a new operation. We're trying to take on the world government, for Christ's sakes. And for Vegapunk, he's like, I can't help you if you don't have resources. I can't build anything. So this is the seed of the plan, right? You wanted me to join the Freedom Fighters. I wanted to work with the world government because of resources. How can we bridge that gap, even though we're both on the same accord about scholars and information? Well, we can do that by planting the seed in a different way. In Kuma, Vegapunk mentions that not even a year later, Dragon, Ivankov, and Kuma formed the Revolutionary Army. Now, this is right before Luffy's birth. I want you guys to pay attention to something. The man that you see before you looks super motivated, focused, intent on taking down the world government. This is not the man that goes on to have a child. Dragon met a woman he could not refuse. I think Luffy's mom has to be one of the most amazing people in the world to take the resolve of this man and somewhat create a distraction in Monkey D. Luffy. Now, Luffy is obviously the savior that will bring forth the dawn, but looking at Dragon, I cannot fathom someone knocking him off of his focus. But he had a kid shortly after this, in the midst of becoming the most wanted and scariest man in the world to the world government. I want to meet Luffy's mother for several reasons. It was super interesting hearing Vegapunk tell Dragon, hey man, there's some good people in the Marines. I'm like, well, his dad is in the Marines. You do know that, right? There's some people saying, well, does this confirm that Dragon was not a Marine? You're like, what am I talking about? Well, Dragon, from what we know, he did not recognize Saul. He said there was a tall giant in bandages. I don't know. Where Saul was a vice admiral. An admiral or someone of high status would know that. But Dragon is 33 years old. He could have been removed from the world government for a long time. Maybe he was a Marine at some point, but then he left. So that does not dispel that entire theory. I thought it was very interesting though, wasn't it? But Dragon being upset, showing emotion, having a goal, a purpose, and Vegapunk reinforcing, reassuring him, they're good people in the Marines, Dragon. Don't lose sight. Keep going. That felt great to see. Characterization, more depth, actually acknowledging the problem and seeing the root of it and where it was where Dragon drew the line and said it was time. Loved it. Emotional chapter for various reasons in regards to Robin, getting a glimpse with Dragon, finding out about Vegapunk and his true form. It's so interesting because his forms, they seem to move independent of what Vegapunk is going through. In the chapter, it looks like Vegapunk actually warped to where the Straw Hats were because he talked about space-time being affected due to the warp. So warping is about to be a thing in his story. Something I threw out there, and you guys can tell me if I'm crazy about this, if I wanted this to happen, is Luffy, Vegapunk, Bonnie, Jinbei, that group, they warp, but they warp to Fairyverse and they warp right in front of Enel, and Enel does the Enel face, then they warp right back to Egghead. And it's like, wait, did I just see? I'm seeing things. I gotta go lay down, right? I think that would be an amazing way to introduce Enel back into the story because I think ultimately we're going to the moon. We are. Believe it or not, we're going to the moon. We already have hover shoes. It's inevitable. Guys, I feel like there's so much more to talk about. I've been talking for a while now. Just a few things more I want to address. The books being saved after the Ohara has been burning. Well, the books, it was so many books. It was piled into the lake. It was going up. Do you guys think this is incompetence? Well, that's what I felt initially. But then I talked to my guys and the conclusion was it is incompetence, but it's more so incompetence based on lack of information. For the regular Marine, they come in to destroy Ohara. They're thinking, well, we're just destroying Ohara because they're bad people. They don't know they're suppressing information. Even the Gorosei doesn't know certain things, right? Imu is holding all this information and they're trying to enforce these things without telling these people a lot. So even if the average Marine comes across all these books, it's just books. We killed all the people. It doesn't matter, right? They would know, hey, no, destroy all the books. But if they tell you destroy all the books as well, that sets off somewhat a thing. Why are we destroying books as well? Oh, we're trying to get rid of information. a lot of these things they're trying to accomplish is lack of information. You guys remember the last time information caused mayhem that could not be even fixed? Yeah, Whole Cake Island. Lack of information, lack of communication, and things that could not be done in the way it should be, so then it led to disaster. Opera, forgot about opera. And so the world government, they're operating in the same way, where they're trying to have things done without relaying all the information because they cannot. And so when things goes awry, they just erase the island and call it a cleansing. It's pretty sick. There are a bunch of weird things in this chapter before I end it, but the weirdest thing was Frankie's comments after they talked about the world government erasing everything. Was he listening to the same thing? I was thinking, could it be like an Odin situation? Back in Wano, when we heard about the Odin story initially, we did not see the entire story or hear the entire story again. All we saw was the Straw Hat's reaction to the story, right? They were talking about the story, then we jumped to the reaction after the story. I was like, well, did I miss something? Well, no, it's not the same thing. Frankie just saying something random where I'm like, what is he talking about? Like, really, what is he talking about? That was super weird. Expect some more streamlined, condensed thoughts Sunday, where I really have to think through some things, because the man scarred by fire, Aokiji. It's crazy. Aokiji wasn't even in this chapter, and he might be the MVP. That's nuts, right? Or rather, I should say that's cold. But guys, give me your thoughts. How did you feel about the chapter? One of your favorites? For the diehards, this chapter was great, even though there are things that we probably already seen. But overall, Oda is wrapping up this story, giving us all the juicy details. But give me your thoughts. How do you feel about it? Make sure to like the video if you did. Subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Follow me on Twitter at BragoDAce. Follow me on Instagram at BragoD.Ace. Thank you to my patrons. I appreciate you guys all so much. Guys, again, like and subscribe. Thank you to my members as well. Appreciate you guys. Thank you. And I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.
Okay, I start doubting me, I felt lost.